No, detective's car. Goes to Mal.
It used to be able to transport it over.
Alrighty, so we'll call a committee meeting to order. We have all the committee members here present. Kelly, did you have any changes to the minutes also? I don't know, Gwendolyn said she did not, so we'll approve those minutes. We have no presentations, of course. We're moving along to the first item of business, which is our resolution 3196, the award of construction contract with Fur and Sons for Ranger Springs Pump House replacement, and use the staff lead on that.
We can go right here to the engineer.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, council members. It's good to see you on a somewhat sunny evening. And so it's good to see you again, Dan and Kelly, and nice to meet you, Gwendolyn. So welcome aboard. Thank you so much. Ken. Yes. So thanks for your help making decisions and making Bonney Lake better. I appreciate that. So we've got a fairly robust team because this is a really important project. But just working around the table, Todd Bright, superintendent, Jim Miracle, substitute for water, Jason Sullivan, our new director, and Clayton Posey, the RH2, our project manager. So tonight is about Ranger Springs. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the history, what it does for the city, where we're headed, and at the end of the night, I'm going to ask you to fund the construction of the project by using a little bit of funds that we have from our Cedar View Water Project. So to make it go. So that I will start. And Leslie, where'd you go?
I don't know if we need her or not.
They're probably printing out pages.
Okay.
So on my screen is the PowerPoint presentation that's listed in there. Let's share my screen.
Sounds like your fridge is about to go around.
And look, they spent because then it means I get a new one.
Mayor already bailed out on us tonight.
All right.
And he said we're boring or something like that. He walked out of the room.
Oh, he's ready.
And it's like, I'm fine, go on, be that way.
Are we boring?
His
No,
car
sir.
broke down.
No.
He has to get his car fixed.
That's what he gets for
That's the
that.
one that- That's the one that.
I didn't
he
even
didn't
break down.
use.
Come unplugged or something.
We got
Recall
recalled.
frame cord.
Oh, yeah, we got that.
He
up there.
was a day late for the
Quick
conference.
restart.
Been trying to charge to get Pulpit Mountain.
So imagine we could all walk downstairs, walk across 410 to the intersection of Sumner Buckley. And instead of heading down the hill, somewhere to go see Ryan, we head down Eli River. And down at the bottom is a gate.
Well, it's not at the bottom, but it's a little ways down.
I'm sure it's about halfway down.
No, I don't know about that.
So
Like a quarter inch.
so there's us, there's Thunder, there's Puyallup, there's 410, there's where Lake Ranger Springs Police Station house is at.
Hey, everybody kind of, I think we know, Glenn, you know where that's at,
Mhm.
right? So, because if you went out here to this intersection of Dairy Queen, you know, and you just kind of turn left into that intersection.
Oh, you
that
go
little road
So that little road and
Yeah.
then there's that little side road that goes
You'd
down.
end up down there if you're able to
I
get to
have
the gate.
never been
he's
down
talking
that
about.
road because I didn't know where it went.
No, it doesn't go very far. There's a ways. It stops.
Figured it was
The
private property.
Yeah.
Got a half mile when you run into residents.
Yeah.
Very near.
So if you do drive down that road, get through the gate, you'll see this building. And it's
Let's see.
50 years old this year. So 24 metal building that's been serving the city for 50 years. And inside of that is 3 clear wells. And what a clear well is basically just a big concrete box with 3 pumps inside of it. And take note of the asphalt on the outside. It kind of looks like a horseshoe or a U shape. And underneath that grass, there is a bunch of collection manholes and perforated pipes. And it all draws in groundwater and takes it to those pumps. Granger Springs provides about a third of our water supply. So it's combined with Victor Springs and the ballpark wells. That's what is in the water in your glasses around the table. So. So. That's a little bit.
Jason, I need you to fix this one.
So, this is a busy slide, there's a lot on it. The only thing I want you to look at and pay attention to is that red box. That's the existing building that's just in the picture. So, and that's what's going away. So we're building a new one right at the bottom of the U shape of that horseshoe. And you can see very vaguely where that collection system is. It comes all the way up here. All the way up here. It collects all that water, which is at the end of it. After it does that, it brings it up to this chlorine platform. Okay. So it's a very complex system. So this puts a little bit of dose of chlorine into it. This puts a little bit of a caustic soda to adjust the pH. And then there's also a standby generator right here to make sure that it's always in power.
Where's the new building projected to be in there?
Next slide.
Okay.
But since you asked, it's right here.
Okay.
Real close to the next piece of it. Here's the next. There's a picture of the new building. So, Clearwell is the kind of open white space in the bottom. The line going down is a pump. Green motors up on the top, and that is a CMB block building. It'll look real similar to some of the other city-owned buildings that you see around town to support our wells and our pumps.
Why does this one have only one clear well versus the other one has three? Are we just adding an additional?
So, excellent question. Why does this only have one? The only reason is because this is just a cross section through it. So this is like a loaf of bread sliced in half. There's actually 3 in there. I'm just giving you a slice.
Okay.
The building above, we're also adding 2 tanks. That's in the dashed outline. Okay. They're about 900 gallons, but they allow us to make our own caustic soda. Right now, we bring it in totes and we use forklifts to empty it, drain it, and it's just a safety hazard to have our staff underneath the loaded forklift draining it.
That's a relatively new building, that top one there, right?
So that was built about the time when I was here last year, 2002, 2003. So it's been a while, but it's not brand new.
Why did they, if there's an issue with it, because I think that's kind of an addition to the, that's a Schedule B, if you will, to the contract or whatever it is.
Yes.
And they add on. And they didn't recognize that issue that you're talking about before or something, because like I said, that's a relatively new facility.
So the way that it's set up now is you're buying it in bulk and you're driving it down there. And that building around the other side of it has a set aside forklift. And you lift up the tote and you fill up the system, and that's how you do it. Instead of making it on site, you buy it pre-made.
Yeah.
And that was just the
What does it
decision.
do at Victor Falls right now?
What do they do at Victor Falls right now?
Yeah.
Let me get back to you on that. Let me keep on going on Granger. Back to now.
Yep.
Victor does, okay?
That's good.
Victor Falls is on-site generation of chlorine. I believe your question for, if you don't mind,
Sure.
for Granger Springs down there. The reason that we didn't have the tanks before was the fire department concern because of the gravel road access.
Okay.
So.
Oh, at Granger Springs, and now that we don't have the gravel road
Yes.
access.
It's paved all the way down now. We can
And there's
move forward.
bigger turnaround area down there for them is
Kind of
what it was
rebuilt
explained to
a
me.
little bit, Yeah. It was asphalted down to that area before. It was just because you guys have actually extended the asphalt in your gated area even down to the pump house before, because it's always been asphalted down to where you built this new,
Correct.
the old new
That's
building.
fire had no
Is it
concerns with
cost
it.
effective to do our own caustic soda to make our own, plus safety, because we're not worried about people being standing underneath a forklift.
Yes, safety is a big issue. Jim can share a story where he had some caustic spilled on emergency trip, sprayed to the shower, emergency shower down there to make sure that you don't lose your sight. So
Yeah.
it's a big safety thing there. I'd have to get back to you on what exactly the cost savings, but I'd say they're about the same.
Okay.
Going back in time a little bit to May 2023, we put this out to bid and we opened bids. The low was 2.6, our high was 2.8. We were over budget. So Dan and Kelly and Tom Dawson, we decided to reject bids because over budget, we're not going to move forward with it like this. So what we did is listen to our contractors. And that squiggly red line is my intent to show you is the costs were just going up and up and up. And we needed to get that peak to drop back down. So one of the big ones was to allow the soils that come from that excavation to remain on site rather than be hauled all the way up back up to here and dumped somewhere. And it was a big savings. Clayton spent a lot of time, gets a lot of the credit for spending time with our staff, our maintenance staff, implementing things that are less costly to try to get the cost down within our budget.
So but your engineering estimate you ran at this time looks like there's that 2.5 million, right? Was this particular without the caustic soda option?
7.
Yeah.
But it looks to be kind of the same as what we had before.
So you can read my mind when we get to the next slide. Answer that question next slide. Okay. So scooting ahead to January 2024, after we have went over these plans with contractors, put out to bid again, our low bid was 2.5, which is right around our engineer's estimate, which shaved about just shy of $130,000 off of what the price was back in May. So that was a huge win for us. Project funding. So in 2023, you had about 2.2 million to do this. We add on a 10% contingency to the bid for construction contingency. In addition, we need construction management services to pay the contractor, inspect all the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, all the specialty things that go into a pump station building that we don't have that expertise in-house. So this project is the perfect use of a consultant such as Clayton that allows our staff to expand as big projects come through and then shrink as they near completion. Another project that we had in that same 2023-24 budget was Cedar View Water Project. And that is kind of joined hand in hand into the Cedar View residential area. So Cedar View Park is just kind of right across from Cusco. And it's a neighborhood that has a lot of our old water mains in it and no sewer. So we moved together, we would have had a project to do both at the same time because you want to tear up the road, tear the Band-Aid off and put it back once. That project is not going this year. To make it, there's about $2 million in there for water for the budget. We need about $850,000 from that water in that project from our water utility to make this one go. So the last bullet there is today. We sat down with staff from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we thank you to Leslie and Ryan applied for this funding 6 months ago, 9 months ago.
Well, it started like in 2020
2020.
and it finally is coming forward.
Yeah.
But it's through, we applied through Congresswoman Schreier's office initially, and her office has been helped us get into this Water Resources Development Act of 2022. So we have 3 million in there for water and wastewater infrastructure for the Cedar View project. There's gonna be, I think, work ahead of us to get that, but, it's at least earmarked in there for that.
I thought that was the one we lost a long time ago.
We lost them too.
And we've gotten it back a couple times. We lost it and it reappeared twice now. So, yeah, so,
What?
yeah,
Leslie and I were talking, we're gonna try to take some steps to get us a little bit more formally concreted,
yeah.
over the next couple months.
Moving ahead, this money's got a lot of strings.
Yeah.
I don't read it to you,
Yeah.
but it's to make that money real. We're gonna have to work with them on a contract and letter of intent and all the things they talked about today in our meeting. But it won't be ready for,
Yeah.
at the earliest 2025, 2026, maybe even later than that. So, and that's what you'll plug back into Cedar View. Cedar View's not ready to go. It needs some funding. The funding is there, but it's just not, it's not ready to use.
So for the project cost originally, for the Granger Springs, right, that's what I was kind of looking at, what did we use originally for that in the comp plan then for this particular project? We had it at 2.2 or something like that, or whatever it was, because that's why I like to connect, because our water plan is what our rate base is circular made from.
Sure.
So if we go like changing projects in there and they creep up to the cost, then, we're putting pressure on increased water rates later on, because we didn't, stay with our funding plan.
So I would
Yeah.
answer your question. What I heard you say is this gonna change water rates by moving projects from another water
Well,
project?
the cost, though, I look, I should be able to look in the water comp plan, and I see Granger Springs rebuild,
Sure.
and it says like 2 million or whatever. It's like 1.5 million, or whatever it says.
Well, I think if you looked in the water comp plan from 10 years ago, it's not gonna have those numbers in it,
No, the
because
most recent one we passed.
that would be the rate analysis, and I'm not sure what we had in the rate analysis.
Well, because we have the newest comp plan that identifies these projects.
Right, but that was the water comp plan was adopted about 4 or 5. Like, you remember when we did the general water system
I
plan?
think it was 2020.
Yeah, so 2020. And then we had that huge spike in inflation,
Right, yeah,
and so the 2020 plan wouldn't have foresaw that.
yeah, but then
That
we kind of like you said, with the rate
Then the
analysis.
rate analysis,
Has these projects listed in it.
yeah,
Yes.
but I'm not sure, 100% sure.
The Granger's in there.
Granger's in there, but I don't know what
Oh, it
project
has to be in
cost.
there, 'cause you
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you can't magic it.
I just can't remember the number.
$2.1 million.
I
So
think John might pull it.
I was looking at the 850,000, the transfer, so that's coming from Cedar View, and then it would be transferred into the Granger.
Yes.
So, and that's because we have that money available for Cedar View. Is that through the grant that 850,000 is available, or is that something that we budgeted?
It's an excellent question. So that money is city funds that's sitting there for Cedar View.
Because I was gonna say that's a grant restrictions that it has to stick with Cedar View. So, okay, so that would be,
Budgetary projection, they're trying to move it because they think that later on they'll have the monies for it.
for Cedar View,
Right, from their
from the grants.
magical $3 million federal allocation that plus and minuses all the time.
Well, and just to kind of add to that, the reason that we also targeted the Cedar View money is we're not doing the Cedar. Part of that, big part of that grant was the funding to do the Cedar View dry lines for sewer. And we're really not wanting to proceed with tearing up the road to put water lines in and replace water lines. And then come back and tear up the roads that we fixed to put in the dry sewer line. So we're trying to do those 2 projects simultaneously, so we're only ripping up the roads once.
Yeah.
And so since we weren't moving forward with that project this year, that $1.7 million is sitting in the water fund available to do water projects. So it's more of a reappropriation of $850,000 that's sitting in the water fund from a capital project that we're not going to do to a capital project that is a high necessity to complete. Did I explain that, Greg? Yes.
So we're going back to just actual money that's allocated for this particular project, right? Because we had the one bid we had to throw out because it was over. But this kind of looks like it's the same deal, you know. I was kind of thinking you guys were gonna come back and say, okay, this is what we're gonna go out to bid for, you know. Last time the engineer's estimate was 2.5 million. Now this project is coming in at, you know, what do you think, $2 million is our engineer's estimate? I don't know whether it was you or you that got, you know.
Yeah.
You guys that invent that stuff, or these are really hard to kind of come up with these figures for, like, you know, what does it cost on some of this stuff?
Right.
So was there a difference between that, or how did we get, you know, seen?
So there was some cost savings between bids that we rejected and the bids that we're recommending award.
Well, I don't care about the bid, I care about the engineer's estimate that we went out last time, right?
So the last time, the engineer's estimate was around 2.5,
Yeah.
and the engineer's estimate,
2.5 also,
correct.
plus the cost of cost.
So,
But the bids came in over budget, so you voted to not go forward with it.
Yeah.
So
we
now they
rejected all
were
of it.
able to save 137,000, and so now they're back down to closer to the 2.5, right? So.
correct.
Through magic math there, right?
Well, I think part of it, as Ken mentioned, we allowed the soils to stay on site. And if you've ever done a construction project,
Yeah.
hauling soil and finding a place to dispose of soil
Sure. I mean,
is an added cost because you have the diesel cost, truck cost.
Sure, yeah.
It's in a cost.
why would we ever put that cost in the first place, right?
Well, we didn't, but there was nothing in the contract that said you could leave the soil on site. So when people bid, they're assuming they have to truck the soil out. Correct, Ken and Titan?
Correct. It was especially pronounced that steep winding road that goes down there, 1 lane asphalt road that, boy, you'd be burning up the diesel and the brakes to get all that soil out of it.
So when you guys looked at it, we go, you know, for like, especially Gwen, I don't know if she's went through these before, right?
Not necessarily before.
Because So the engineer's estimate, you know, the bidders know the engineer's estimate when they, you know, they know that. So they kind of like have a couple of tracks. They either say, I really want this work, and they're gonna try to bid it closely to it, or they're kind of like, yeah, I'll throw a number at it, right?
Mhm.
So most of these guys were kind of like, I want this work kind of thing, except for maybe one or something. Did you guys look at, you know, how do you come up with, why is there such a radical difference in, like, you know, the mobilization cost between the three bidders? Cause you have, you know, one at the 100,000 and then the other one at like, what, $600,000?
The question I'm gonna ask is, how do you justify the mobilization cost of one of the bidders? And that is, each bidder writes their own number in by hand and calculates that's their own way. Typically on engineer's estimates, you pick a percentage of what the total construction cost is, and that's the mobilization.
Yeah.
But depending on where a contractor has his yard, his mobilization costs. So, McClure is in Mill Creek. They're based in Mill Creek, Washington, but they have some staff contingent that works locally on projects around here. So a lot of their staff are local, but a lot of their equipment has got to come from Mill Creek. Castle and Sons, which if you, the bid tab that dances look at is they were the high bidder at around $3 million. You got it. It's right there. Yep.
So they bid, you know, 650 for mobilization, and then McClure bid 100.
Correct. So, McClure, to their credit, one of the things their staff did is we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting, since it's an area that you can't really get into.
Yeah.
Before bids came in, and we allowed any contractor that wanted to bid on the project to visit us at that building and ask us questions. And McClure was the one that showed up. So Castle and Sons was not the one that showed up. So they showed up, they knew where the site was, they knew the location, and that allowed them to really fine tune in their mobilization.
They fall into the, we're just gonna throw a number at this and think if we get it, we get it, or we don't. They didn't really want to look.
I think McClure sounds really good. Because
McClure did, yeah.
Because they showed up.
Castle did.
Right.
They looked like kind of swagged it.
Yeah.
Can I add a clarification?
Sure.
So also, the contractors will bid different bid prices on and weight their bid in different areas.
Oh, yeah.
So for instance, mobilization, some like to front load that because
Yeah.
they'll get a little more of that money toward the front of the project.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
kind of fund the
Sure.
project for them. We can't really tell them or guide them on how to bid that.
Yeah.
We can give them like minimum amounts they must bid, and we might have said that mobilization must be at least 7% of the construction cost. We can't give them a maximum.
Yeah.
And so the clearer might have said, well, we're gonna go 600,000 on mobilization, but we'll bid some later bid items cheaper, so that overall it comes out to be the same.
Yeah, yeah.
They'll just be able to kind of fund
Yeah.
the project a little earlier for
So
them.
they get to put in their, requests for payments. They're not actually tied to specific bid items, they say.
Right, so a lot of the mobilization comes in the first few requests for payments. So essentially, they're trying to get some of their money up front, and it helps them fund the project. And we can't really do anything about it.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to, make it kind of known or how that works, that, they're doing that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
They're not actually billing for each bid item per se, they're billing
Right,
against the project in a fashion that they can
Right.
get away with.
and you'll see in later bid items, they might bid something really low. It's obviously not enough, but it's because they moved some of that to, those earlier bid
And
items.
when we're evaluating bids, we're required by law to just look at the total bid, not the bid, not the individual bid estimates, correct?
Right, yeah, unless, there's some sort
But,
of.
yeah, right, so that was the question, because when you go for like the pumps, right, you guys said that there's like 3 pumps now or something down there?
2 pumps.
Okay, 2,
I'm sorry, when there's, if you open the door, there's 2 other ends of the backup one.
There's just 2 large pumps.
Okay, I'm sorry, there's 2.
no worries. And that's, where there's a significant bid variation, right? So I imagine you guys looked at that, right? Because your engineer's estimate comes out at whatever it is, 95,000 for those pumps, they're pretty, and then a rebuild of one of them. Right,
Right.
is that a new pump and motor? So if there's 2 existing, why is there 1 new and 1 rebuild?
So one of the reasons you need to do this project is the old pump station is not very reliable and actually broke down in the summer of 2020, I think. And so you guys had to do an emergency pump replacement in 2020. And so now that we're doing this project, that pump is only 3 years old. So we're like, well, we want to reuse that.
Yeah.
And it's a rebuild because it just needs some lengthening, some retooling to make it match the other one. So that's why there's 1 new pump, 1 rebuild pump.
And
And when you're looking at that line item, then, and then you had like McClure, they said, okay, I'm gonna rebuild that for 55,000, right, for that particular item. But yet you see the other builder says that, oh, well, that's gonna cost me 150. Is that like you guys worry about any of that? Saying, well, why does this guy think it's, is this gonna be a substandard rebuild compared to the other?
For that one, I know for a fact, at least one of the bidders just bid it as 2 new pumps. They're like, we don't want to bother rebuilding. And they take on some risk when they, take that pump out and rebuild it, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
kind of works. So like, we're just gonna bid it 2 new pumps, which we would be okay with.
And that works for the maintenance folks, they're not gonna get stuck with 2 weird pumps that they don't have like any way to work on, as opposed to they would really like to have the old ones rebuilt, right? So you guys are in charge of all those details, but
well, I think
hopefully you flag that stuff.
part of the problem down there right now is just the one where we have the 2 different horsepower issues. Yeah, so currently right now, Jim and Ken could probably get into a lot more detail. One of the big critical issue here is that the pump horsepower isn't the same. So one's a little motor and then a little pump, and then the other one's a big pump. And Jim was explaining to me that creates some problems in the summer when it comes to our peak demand for a water source. So I don't know if you can
We
elaborate on
got
that.
2 new ones, then they'd be pumping at the same horsepower.
It'll be redundant, yes.
Simultaneous.
Originally, I believe Clayton, that station was built as a summer use and a winter use, and that's why the two different horsepower pumps and saving electricity and everything.
Do VFDs on both of them or something
There is.
anyways, so kind of a non-issue there, right? I just think, my point was that, because you guys are in charge of the details and making it work, that you don't shortchange what you need, right? So that hopefully somebody gets the word that, hey, we're gonna get stuck with this POS that nobody really wants to work on, and it's gonna be a maintenance nightmare just because it fit in this bid and management decided that, oh, that's the way to go, and this is the only way the project could go, but our boots on the ground people are gonna be like, man, this sucks, I can't believe they shortchanged this piece over here, right? Forgot to put the bolts on the door just because the external contractor was leaving things off, so wait. What? Hey, you're in, she's the one that's in the,
She's the one in danger.
But it sounds like the rebuild pump is the one that we dealt with a couple summers ago.
Yeah.
right.
And the new pump is to replace the old 75 horsepower pump, correct?
But you guys are okay with the details of the gear, right? Of course, you're gonna say yes, but you can always like poke somebody somewhere else. and
We
say,
ask
"Hey,
for it
you know,
here
we need
all the
that."
time. And then we just
That's
come to an
good.
agreement here.
Yeah.
So you ask the Ferrari and you'll accept the Mercedes?
Well, even sometimes it's not the Mercedes.
It's an Impala.
Yeah,
Impala.
it's comfortable, it's
Fit for
practical.
purpose,
Yes.
we got a budget, we gotta stay
Right.
in with,
Go
we
for
got a
election.
plan.
Be good stewards, yeah.
We have a plan.
And I will say the pump station building house itself was built in 1975, correct, Ken?
And then probably resell one of the containers until they put.
I'm sure it's metal.
And it's not as weather tight as you would want to have it as a lift station.
Oh,
Oh, that's what I was gonna have, that's what I got.
Yeah.
There's a lot of,
Scary, that could have gone through the pumps.
well, that's why we would have redundant pumps, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why this project kind of is elevated to the top of Ken's list and Clayton's list.
Are we gonna do bulletproof glass this time?
No glass, CMU block walls.
Block walls, yep.
So on the, like, you can, one of my main things about project cost, right, is I find it very odd that we actually build in a minor change item, right? Because we got it here and we got it on the other side too. So I'm not excited about allowing an extra $50,000 for somebody that says they're gonna do a project for us.
So the question here is, why do we allow a minor change bid on in addition to contingency?
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's on their side, right? Because, the contractor comes in, they're gonna paint your house for X number of dollars, and then they find stuff, and then they say, hey, wait a minute, this is gonna cost a little bit extra, to do this work. And I don't have a problem with them coming back to us and saying, wait a minute, we found, this extra, we need to do this, but to actually build it in the front, where it's like, oh, well, it's $50,000, it's like, really? You can either do the project what it said, or you can't, from the contractor's perspective.
so the answer to that is the reason why you put in a minor change bid on them in every one of your public works projects is because there's no perfect set of plans, there's no perfect engineer,
Yeah, there is.
and there's no
Yeah,
project.
there is. There should be.
So-
You guys shouldn't be issuing them if they weren't, right?
Okay, well, let me keep going.
Okay.
So, And then, on your last project that we brought back to your 200th paving project, which is really simple
Yep.
paving project, no curb, no gutter, no sidewalk. Basically some asphalt and paint, it had a minor change bid in them.
Mhm.
And for a project of this complex, with all the different trades and all the different parts and pieces,
Yeah.
there's no way that you could ever plan for every single thing that you're gonna come up with when you construct this project.
Yeah, and I understand the talk. I completely disagree with the walk, but,
Well, I think another way to keep it,
that's not what, it may be normal, I guess, in the public works folks, but it's just not.
well, I think the other.
Because you have it on the other side too, because, I'm gonna look at the other piece of, too, that you have it, the contingency on the other
Yeah.
side, that's our side, that's kind of like, well, no, you're not getting the 10% on the other side also.
Well, and I think the way to look at it is you can't account for every,
Yeah, that's fine.
everything.
That's so they come back to us, right?
Well,
If we go out to bid for a $2.5 million project and the contractor says, I can do that, and he says, right in writing that I can do it for $2.5 million, then they do it for $2.5 million. If they get down there and they find out that something is like a problem, they start doing RFIs and all this kind of fun, and they get around to this roundy thing. Then, you know, it's kind of like,
but if it's,
but you should be able to hold them to the $2.5 million. They don't get to come back and say, oh, that's an extra whatever.
unless it was a change in condition, and that's why, in addition to the plans, there's a spec book that's about this quick, and if you ever have insomnia, Councilmember Fulton, just pick up a bid spec book. Within 20 minutes, you'll probably want to doze off. That's the spec book for this project. It tries to account for every single thing.
It's an engineering
Yes,
thing.
it's an engineering thing. But once they start digging into those walls and they start digging
There's no
into the
digging in the
ground,
walls.
I mean, tearing the building down.
That's okay. It's pretty straightforward.
Once you start digging into anything, whether it's the ground, it's tearing down buildings, we can't account for everything.
That's why they bid it, and that's why the contractor
Right.
has contingency built into their
Right,
bids.
but the reason that we have this built in there is if there is a change in conditions that we have to address. If you have to stop the project in order to address that, you're also risking adding additional cost to the project through delay damages. Because if we delay their work because of a change in condition, they can also, under the contract, there's that provision as well. So by having this small,
If we drive the change, but still, but you're also, again, remember, you're asking for 10% on your side.
in case we run into something,
So you're asking for 10% over on our side, and then you're giving them $50,000 on their side.
That's the confusion. So the bid on $50,000 isn't a gimme. It is,
Well, yeah, it is, because if they bid 175 million dollars, you're dang well better that they're gonna bill you for $2.175 million.
there's-
I mean, so that's not my experience managing construction projects, is that money is used for unforeseen conditions, things that you don't have.
So you're saying they're not gonna bill you for it, they're just gonna.
they would have to demonstrate to everybody that,
Of course they do, I know, that's pretty straightforward, I have to do these all the
Right.
time, it's pretty straightforward. They're gonna
Right.
say, oh, this costs us a little bit more, and everybody's gonna like eat sandwiches and say, yeah, you're right, go ahead and bill us for this, and yeah, we know how that works. Still, there's no reason for it to be in there, but it's like little tiny thing, you know, you shouldn't put it in there. It's like, it's fine, it's the way you guys bid it. So you can go down the other road of, oh, we've already opened up the bids and they already have a bidder. You already, gave them the thing and said that they're the responsive bidder. Right?
So the way this works is, something goes wrong for $100,000. They have to spend the 50 first, tell you what went wrong, spend the 50 first, and then we have to pony up the contingency value for the other
That's-
50.
Possibly.
So,
But, yeah, they gotta come back and get the contingency.
Well, anything over than what they bid on, they're not gonna get paid for more than what they bid, right?
We've done that before. We've done it.
But they always do, right? And they should. Because if the conditions change and there's different things and they didn't understand the spec and they want to argue about that, that's fine. That's what, we did that with Public Works all the time.
well, I would say as a more of a general practice, everybody that's sitting on the city side of the table when it comes to these contracts is not going to willingly give away that fiduciary responsibility that we have to the city to make sure that we're only paying for the work that's within the contract. And if they're claiming it's outside the contract,
It's in the contract now, though, seems my point. You've already said that, you know, this is your contract for $2.175 million. That's what that's what you signed on the dotted line for. It's like, build me a pump house and it's 2.17596.
but the contingency sits outside of that.
That's not a contingency, that's in the contract. It's a minor change, it's in the contract, that's what they've been for.
here's a scenario that you might use that. Let's imagine that you went out there and you started digging that hole in that grassy field. And instead of coming across dirt, you found a buried car.
Dead body.
So
All kinds of fun
that
stuff.
you can't see, you
Yes.
don't know what's there. Even though we went out there and dug a couple test holes. You would pay the contractor to haul that car to where it's supposed to be disposed of.
Yeah, we know. We did this with Public Works and we've done this many times and we do it over many of the projects. It's just exactly right. They find things that aren't in the contract. Need to be addressed.
Or they work in March when it's raining.
Right. Yeah. That's the normal that we are experienced, that we've done repeatedly. We have no problem with them coming forward and saying, hey, this is not right. This is, need to change order.
Well, I would say we're at 5:40 and we do have council at 6 o'clock and we have 2 other agenda items. So I'm just kind of looking at the CDC and kind of seeing what.
So what, how can we move this forward? Because we also have, I guess if we're okay with the Cedar View move issue kind of thing, right? I don't know.
Transferring.
Yeah, that's probably not a great thing, but it's
Is that
okay.
something that needs to go to finance or can we do
I don't
that?
think so. 'Cause they're just asking to allocate it. or
Yeah, we're just-
Allocate it differently.
Yeah, we're out.
Pay them the same.
Yeah, it's still water fund.
something. So you're just
We're
like
just changing the
delaying.
timeline though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're delaying
Delaying.
from,
Delaying the
So
cedar.
if we didn't do that, when would we do the CDU work?
Not till we have the money to do the sewer work. So that's what I was trying to say is whether or not you reallocate the water line work for Cedar View to this project doesn't determine the critical path item for when the Cedar View work gets done, because we want to do the sewer dry lines at the same time we do the water replacement, so we're only ripping up the streets once.
When did we approve the money for CDU?
It was part of the CIP budget, and I think it got moved once we thought that we lost that $3 million. It got pulled off the CIP list. So now we're looking at moving that project forward in 2025 as part of this federal funding that we're receiving. And we want to do this water lines at the same time. It's a timing issue. That's why we're wanting to move it forward.
So when we approved it, and you guys did that, I'm just wondering, when did you decide you're gonna tear up the streets once instead of twice?
That was the whole plan when we got the federal money for the $3 million, was so that we only having, because you add a significant amount of cost, both on the construction management side and cost to the project by having to dig up that road and patch it and pave it twice. You're basically redoing the road twice, which means you're adding a lot of cost to the project. So in last year's CIP, there was a $3 million money is added in the sewer side for this, the sewer trial line. We had assumed we had this federal money. Then right after CIP got approved, we got told we didn't have that money. And so we kind of have moved that project off, and that was in 2023. In 2024, just yesterday, we found out, no, it's back on, but it's a 2025 thing. So we're trying to line up doing the sewer work and the water line work kind of simultaneously. And when you're just looking at general priorities for the system and heading into the summer and everything, that this kind of the Granger Springs project starts moving to the top of the list. From a overall prioritization for the system. Am I saying that right, Ken?
Yes. Like the Granger Springs is something that's at the end of the timeline. This is we went out to bid twice. This is the best price that we've been able to get on it.
Yeah.
If you let it go and it fails catastrophically like it did, you're paying a huge markup on men and materials, and you're unlikely to be able to get the parts.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a good project. I don't know if everybody else does, but obviously we wouldn't be here if it wasn't a good project. I believe they had a lot of reasons behind it. I'm just worried about the cost of it because, moving the Cedar View money is one thing. It's on, you can move that project around because we'll get funding for it. But, again, what we put in our capital facilities plan for the rate base was X number of million.
Yeah, I think that's a larger question that we'll just have to tackle. I don't think the option is try to find bidder that's going to bid it for what was in the rate package, we already know that that's not reality because we
Sure.
bid it twice.
Yeah,
And the bids just aren't coming in that way.
right.
And so I think that's a larger policy question. Yeah, we need to go back and look at the estimates in there and work with Clayton and Ken, and as we develop our, project costing going forward, kind of how to account for those inflationary costs. But I think
Sure.
saying we don't want to do it because it came in higher than what was in the rate study isn't really a option, because we can't find someone to do it for what was in the rate study if it's lower, because we bid it now twice. And this is what it's going to take to build the project that we need to build.
Well, yeah, rightly so. Kind of
So
use
it's
the big numbers.
like in the future, we don't want to add the minor charge to future bids.
They shouldn't have that in there. I don't want to put that in there, but that's like, it's in there. Like I said, they've already bid this thing. It's kind of hard to come out of there with it. Just not liking that. And of course, the other piece of it is that you guys are asking for the 10% contingency on the other side, on our side.
And that's what I would explain. So I do
Yeah,
apologize.
so, right, and that one's against the what cost? That's the 10% against the 2.5 or 2.6 million?
I look at Ken.
Correct. So there's a 10% contingency in the construction cost.
And we just don't do those in this committee anymore at 10%, at 5, we're kind of like a little bit nervous in my opinion, but I don't, and that's one of those things like I was trying to explain. I don't know whether when or the guys want to change their philosophy, but we have no problem with, coming back to us. Cause see, you've already built it in. You've already gave them $50,000 for minor changes there. They can come back to us all day long and every day. We can always have committee meetings or whatever we want to schedule and say, hey, this is like a little bit over what we thought it was. We need more money for this, and then we can get it. But, to have contingency on our side, it's kind of good if you want it.
Yeah. What's that 10% contingency? That's pretty significant, right?
Yeah, $40 million apparently.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, and how much are we borrowing from Cedar?
8.5. I mean, I'm sorry,
850.
So just because because we don't, there's no reason. It's weird from our end to have any contingency basically at all, because it's just. Why does that make sense?
Well, I think when you bring a budget forward to the council, you say, here is what we think it's gonna be, and here's the contingency. And when they say what they think it should be, does it have the extra 50,000 in it? So then you're saying, okay, so here's your extra incidentals, and then here's like your contingency. If they bring that forward for budgeting purposes, that's one thing. That's a different thing to actually approve the spending and say, go for $200,000, right? I would like them to come back if it's contingency, you gotta come back in.
No, that's why they wrote it into the thing that we would approve. We would give them the extra 10% and say,
Right.
see ya. And then they say, oh, we won't spend it unless we have to. And then we'll come back and tell you about it later.
Can I clarify something on the minor change?
Go ahead.
So it's just reaffirm, it's written in the specifications, salt and salt fourth account, and it's also washed out standard practice. They do not get that money unless they submit a request for it.
Of course.
So there's no changes, they don't get that $50,000, that's 100% guaranteed. And then also the reason for the minor change, at least on the construction side for Ken, for instance, it says that if it's a change that's under a certain amount, and I believe that it's either $5,000 or $10,000, they can submit it as a minor change, and that gives the engineer, Ken, the ability to approve if they want $2,000.
Sure.
They cannot submit a change, like you were saying, $100,000 and use up 50,000 of it. That sort of change cannot be used for minor changes. You'd have to come back to the council for that. But for minor changes, anything less than 10,000 or 5,000, I don't recall which one it is, they can submit a request and the engineer can approve it, without having to wait a month for council to approve it.
Oh, yeah. And our process isn't that long, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
That's the difference between a minor change and then not contingency.
Contingency on the other side. So you guys are looking to release this thing sooner than later, of course. And I guess if you're wanting to make me like happy with it or something, just our side contingency, we cut to 5 or whatever. And then you guys tell us that you're gonna come back if you spend any of that money and tell us why you had to spend it. Other than, I don't know what Kelly and what are thinking.
Is that something that can be done fairly quickly?
Yeah, it
Change it.
says 10 and you change that number to 5.
We'll change it to 5, but we'll leave the dollar amount the same.
There you go.
I mean, Ken, is that something we can live with on our side contingency of 5%? If we need the other 5, come back to the council to.
They're always welcome to come back. You can, if you get a 15% change, you gotta come, you know.
Right, I understand. I was just.
Yeah, no, if that's what it takes to get it passed tonight, that's fine, but we need to leave the 10% in the construction management services. If you look, dig into your resolution, that contingency covers your materials testing. And it also covers your SCADA upgrade. So that once we get this all built, it connects it back into our system as consultants different from Clayton's, funded with parametrics. So you need that contingency to construct a project, to test your concrete cylinders, do the density testing as your backfill.
But, you know, if it's already needed and in the thing, then it would be like, you know, in the project, right? As opposed to contingencies for like, oh shit, the dead body, and we just dug up these and like archaeological stuff.
I guess
I'm sorry, I'm jumping around.
We're talking about this here,
Oh, which one is that one?
10%. Construction contingency.
Yeah.
so to add to that, this 10% is not something the staff came up with. If you dig into our purchasing policies,
Yeah, I know. Well, if we need to change that, we can too, right?
Let me finish, let me finish. when we move forward with these and we prepare our agenda bills with our finance staff and our contract authority staff, that's what they look for. You know, does it meet your purchasing policies? And
Well,
let me finish. 10% is a fair and reasonable contingency to
okay,
have on a project that is this complex.
that's nice, but that's not what this committee's done, and that's not what this committee supports. And we thought that this project was gonna come back to us before you guys even went out to bid. So it's like nice of, in my mind, me to even consider like moving this forward, right? Because it's not what we talked about last year, and it's not what we thought, because we thought this thing was gonna come in at budget. So, you know, keep in mind, it's the difference between the engineering side of the house and the policy side of the house, you know. The council has policies that they want to live with, and we want to live within our budget, and you guys can do whatever you want to do all day long, every day with the past budget, but once you like go over, you know, the budgetary allocations the council has done, then we're like, yeah, okay, wait, now you gotta make us happy, right? So, you know, just because it says something over here, keep in mind what the committee's like looking to do. We're sensitive to charges about water and sewer, and that's what the voters and stuff kind of nails with every time, so.
Right, and I can appreciate that, but as I said, the option to not do the project.
No, that's not what we're talking about, right? So we're just talking about these weird contingencies that I'm talking about right now.
Right, and I guess we on the staff side also understand that every time we spend out of those contingency amounts, we impact our ability to deliver other projects. Right, because it's a drain on the waterfront. And it's something that we don't take lightly. It's something we take seriously, but at the same time, we want to be able to keep projects moving and deliver them consistent with the contract. And so, you know, I understand the frustration that the project's coming in over bid. Sure. We would all love to get it at a lower bid rate. I can say that always is not always successful either. I can remember times where I had big projects that came in half the engineer's estimate, and we ran around being all celebratory, and turns out that's because they did a horrible job and we spent over the engineer's estimate and change orders because they couldn't, or calling in bonds or calling in contracts. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. And, you know, I think Clayton and Ken have done as much as they can to I mean, we met with bidders after the bids were rejected to find out ways we could change the project to create it. I know the 10% contingency, I can appreciate the authorization to spend more money. But at the same time, you know, we're wanting to make sure that we can deliver the project, that we don't create delay for the contractor. And that in actuality, we focus on really what the problem is. We have a 1975 pump house that is failing. We have two pumps in there. One is a 150 horsepower pump, one is 750, which means we don't have the redundancy that we need. And we can continue to have the issues we're having there, we can move forward with the project, understanding the larger policy questions that I think we can address as we address the CIP projects moving forward. Because I think there's two issues. We can agree, Councilmember Clyman, there's the policy question around CIP projects as a total, and then whether or not we move forward with this contract for this one project. I'm just trying to tease apart the policy question from the physical contracting question of getting this project completed.
So my paperwork here says that we're gonna transfer, 522,000, 522, 362. But then the slide says 850.
And there's two contracts. There's the contract for construction management services with RH2, and then the contract with the actual contractor
So
to
this
do
is
the
the
work.
other,
So if you looked under that, there was a second contract and that money included both.
yeah, we haven't
Yeah,
got
you gotta
that
approve
yet.
those, you have to approve both measures to get everything
Okay.
done.
Yeah.
So wait, so what's wrong with I'm not gonna ask my question tonight.
No, we already know, we have to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
That's what I heard.
It might
Yeah,
break.
I was trying to answer your question. Preemption. You've tried to train your council requirements. You got me
I'm trying to
trained.
ask my question, so then we'll just go, why not just go with the 5% contingency and get this going?
Yep.
Right?
Good enough, Jack.
So 5% contingency on construction costs and 10% contingency on the construction management. Is that fair?
And how did we get to 10 on the construction management though?
It's the 10% that we put in there. And I will say
Oh,
it's,
that's our fee, that's non-bidded work.
yeah, the non-bidded work on our side, and
There
it,
you go.
and it includes the $6,800. A portion of that contingency is including the material testing.
Yeah.
And we don't know, and the problem is we don't know how many times you're gonna do material testing, because if you pull the sample and it fails, then you're doing it again and you have to retest it. So
So that sounds like a good compromise, right? We got 5 on one and 10 on the other. We'll see if you can write it up and it'll be at the next workshop or the next council meeting and we'll see what happens.
Yes, we will.
That sounds good. Is that agreeable?
yeah, it's a full item or
You know,
consent, which I
no,
always like to have.
CBC, just on regular, yeah,
CDC issues.
that way, yeah. Cause it'll pass. We'll get it through.
And we'll just kick the comp plan, the code amendments out another month or the
Well,
next CDC app.
And this is, I don't know if they have any.
Or if we want to move them to just work.
I'm
on
okay
it.
with them or whatever, but I don't, you know, if these guys wanna play with you some more, at least.
I think we can move on to, like, the workshop is gonna be okay. I wanted to
Yeah.
talk about cutting up the smaller pieces, because that's a lot.
Sure.
You can,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
walk through and try to digest. I think I get it figured out, and I go back and look at it and I go, oh, wait a minute. I got more questions, right?
I think that would be hard. I think we could do that in the future maybe, but.
Yeah, not just, no, I would say for next year's, let's start in September and roll out maybe smaller steps for us so that I don't get confused.
Yes. So do you want to move, can we move that one forward to city council next week as a CDC item? And that way, if there's discussion, we can answer it.
Well, it's, these guys structure. I'm on that one.
I'm okay with that.
Perfect.
All right.
2 nice things. Right? Look at that. What teamwork.
Give you some yeses.
Hey, give me some yeses. We found a way through, right?
Yeah, I see you. I'm wondering if you remember me or not.
Thanks for all the tough questions, Councilor.